Okay, I think we are there. Let's go ahead and start. Let me just quickly grab my presentation there. So thank you everybody. People have joined in afresh. People who are still joining in. Thanks so much for taking the time. We've tried to make sure we've picked the right time slot this time. It should be evening in the European time zone, a little bit in the morning for people joining in from the North American region, and of course, midnight or past midnight for people in Asia. But thanks so much for joining in. And this session will, of course, be covering a little bit of, what is it that we do. Mostly, it's an introduction of what Sparklite is. I am a community manager who's just recently joined Sparklite. I am joined by Sadhna, who is an associate product manager here at Sparklite. There you go. You see the person waving on your screens. We also have Adam, who's our marketing wizard, and essentially you'd be helping us moderate a bunch of your chat. So anybody who's got any questions that come along the way while we're sort of demoing and we're talking about the platform, please feel free to drop that in on the chat, and then we'll make sure to try and address all of them either in between or by the end of the conversation. All right. And as for the agenda, here's a quick overview, and please don't hold us to this. We will try and have a conversation, really, Sadhna and I. But this is the agenda that you can expect. You'll, of course, get an intro to Sparklite. Anybody who's got some interesting questions as to who we are, what is it that we're building, what kind of problems do we solve, who are the people really, right, behind the whole Sparklite concept. Sadhna will help uncover all of that in the first part of the segment. We'll try and keep it short and simple there. And then, of course, dive right into the product demo, right from, running through the website a little bit, trying to showcase what is it that we put out there, setting up your spreadsheet. So I think no spoilers there. We are spreadsheet people here. The tool is all about working with spreadsheets, building APIs out of this and so on and so forth. And for people who don't really know what an API is just yet, don't worry, we'll cover a short segment. Sadhna will give us an amazing explainer right in between the streams right there. And also talk a little bit about the real world applications that we have solved using the platform, right? By the end, of course, we have Q&A. Feel free to drop them even in between. And we also have a nice, hopefully fun activity at the end where you can expect to take away some nice merch, if depending on how well you were able to sort of get through and participate in the activity. So that's what we've got lined up for the agenda. And with that in mind, let's probably just dive right in. And you can expect us to have more of a conversation. We figured let's rather talk about these things as opposed to just show it on a PowerPoint presentation. So Sadhna, I would love to have you now again on the main stage. Let's talk about it. If you can, help us, take us through who is it that we are and what is it that we're building at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Just, before we get started, to everyone out there who's joined us today, thank you so much for making it. It's so good to see people from so many different countries coming together for one common goal. So Sparklite, this wonderful team came together about 6 months ago where we thought, you know what, we genuinely want to solve a problem that a lot of developers, no-code citizen developers, business founders, biz ops, basically people like me, right? Product managers and business analysts face. We want to automate our workload. We want to build apps, but we don't want to spend time or resources on it. So we come up with the idea of Sparklite, which was inspired by our parent company, Coherent Spark, a multinational. And we basically convert spreadsheet logic into APIs. And as tough as that sounds, it's a very simple, very, very simple process, right? We're building this for no-code developers out there. It's simple, it saves time, and it's hassle-free. We believe that if you can work on a spreadsheet, then you can build an app. Any logic that you have on a spreadsheet, upload it to Sparklite, and you can basically get an API that you can plug on to your no-code app and build something out of it. We'll get into more into what exactly an API is, how we define it, and what you can exactly do with it. But before that, just a little bit of vision. We we're building something for SMEs, and we want people to own their technology. We want people to own their vision of what app they are looking to build. So if you are, for example, a homeowner and you want to manage your finances, you should be able to digitize that on your mobile phone. You don't need to do it on pen and paper or on a spreadsheet. If you are, for example, a rental agency, you should be able to calculate the value of your home within seconds. So we don't stand for wasting time. We want to save time, and we're basically enabling app creators to build the platform of their dreams. Yep.
Right. Yeah, we go. That's the whole idea. That's the big picture right there. And with that in mind, and before we could dive into the product demo itself, right? What do you think people ought to have and ought to know before they could, let's say, get started with Sparklite altogether? What's the prerequisite and a checklist of sorts? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, Saurabh, we are spreadsheet nerds. You definitely need a spreadsheet to get started with, whether it be Excel or Google Sheets. As long as you can extract that Google Sheets as an Excel file and then upload it, that works. Now, we are going to soon have a Google Sheets integration, fingers crossed. But as long as you can build your logic on an Excel, you can upload it to Sparklite and build an app out of it, right? And we've been talking about APIs a lot. I second that, woohoo. We've been talking about APIs a lot. APIs stand for something that sounds dangerous, so I'm not going to say it. But consider an API to be like a connector. For someone like me who has not ever studied engineering, I consider an API to be like a bridge between two software, something that can translate one's language into the other. So in our case, we are converting all that logic that I'm building into my spreadsheet onto my app. And that API that Sparklite builds in a few seconds is just going to push that logic from my spreadsheet into my app. Uh,
Yeah.
and and lastly, you have to kind of, on your spreadsheet, you have to tell Sparklite that these are my inputs and these are my outputs. So for example, if you are building your financial calculator to build your home finances, you have to tell Sparklite that my inputs are going to be how much I spent on partying this week, and your outputs are going to be how much you should not have spent on partying this week. So whatever the calculation is, Sparklite has to understand what my inputs and outputs are, and that is done by something that we call as mapping. We will describe how a mapping is performed as well, but all those tutorials are also available on our website, so not an issue.
Yeah, there we go. So those are the prerequisites. Have something where you can map these things on an Excel. You know, a little bit of an understanding of an API is good. And there are tons of, I suspect, videos and a lot of tutorials out there that can help you explain. But looking at the crowd here, I'm going to go ahead and, on a limb here and assume a lot of you folks know and understand, at least to a good extent, what an API is and how is it that you can, use that in different tools. But if not, feel free to reach out to us. We're really helpful folks, as you can imagine, very talkative, and very very much embedded into making sure people within the community are able to get stuff done. All right, with that said, let's dive right into the product demo. Go take it forward from there, Sadhna. Like, help us, walk us through the website. That's always exciting, and let's build an app. Yeah.
Awesome. Just a quick check. Everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we
All right.
should. Yeah. I see a
Okay.
couple thumbs up there. Yeah, there we
Awesome.
go.
Awesome. So obviously the first thing that you want to do is go to your browser and type sparklite.io. Very simple URL. But what we have here is just, our very basic website. This will give you all the information you need on what Sparklite is, right? We have a very nuanced video here, which will tell you the exact end-to-end journey, what we stand for, how Sparklite can help you, and our vision and mission statement. Why Sparklite? These are just some of our USPs. We can build anything, no matter how complex. And I know that's a stretch, but if you can prove us wrong, I'm looking forward to that. So the mapping video that I was talking about earlier is this link. And again, we'll dive into that as well. What we stand for is converting an Excel file reliably, very securely, and in a code-free way, right? So however you build that logic into your spreadsheet is up to you. You can upload it to Sparklite and out comes an API. In the end, what we love about Sparklite is our integrations, and this library is only going to keep increasing. I will show you a few of the integrations that we offer on the UI, but it's something that we want to keep improving. And of course, we value any suggestions or feedback on what kind of integrations you guys are looking for. So happy to take that as well. Right. And then we have a little bit of a showcase on some of the cool apps that the team has built using the Sparklite API. I am going to show a fifth one, which was very simple to build as well. It took me about 2 hours. And yeah, you can scroll down, check them out. This is my personal favorite, but yeah. And then to get started, we have some ready-made sample files. You can download them. There's a README tab on all of these files that explains exactly how the mapping is performed and what the file is, what kind of logic it includes, and what the next steps should be. All right. Yeah, and that is what we have on our website. Oh, I mean, of course, we have a very beautiful little chatbot down here. So if anybody gets into any questions or any problems, feel free to message us from here and somebody will get in touch with you.
There we go. Yeah.
Yep. And if you would like to sign up with us, then just click on this massive pink button. It's for free. You don't need to give us any credit card details, and we'll get you up on our professional plan for 14 days for free. You can try Sparklite out, see what it is like, try our integrations, and definitely get back to us with feedback. So once you do create an account with us, you are going to be able to log in. And what you end up on is something we like to call our dashboard. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So this is where you can see all the APIs that you've created. I will start to talk a little bit more about how that API is created, but just want to pause here if anybody would like me to clear anything, any questions.
Yeah, I think anybody who's got any queries so far, like in terms of how to navigate the website, even basically creating the account part of it, setting things up about the API in itself. If you're curious about the code logic, and Sam as a product person, so she would have all the answers. She's helped build the entire product end to end. We should be able to get a lot of nice, interesting answers right there. Feel free to drop in the chat as well. It would really and of course we'll have a lot of time at the end to address some of these questions too in case that comes up. But let's see. I think so far I don't see anybody typing. That's fine. I think keep those gears turning in your head, and in case something comes up, please don't hesitate to just drop in that message. We have absolutely no dumb questions. Like even I was curious as to how exactly things work in MS Excel, having worked on Google Sheets my entire life. So I end up asking our team a ton of different questions in terms of, okay, what happens here and what happens there, what different functions work, and really how the backend logic and the backend code works through and through. So yeah, good. We have like a nice feature request there. From Nick, how fast is Sparklite? That's a very good question. Yeah, Simon, do you want to take this? I think in general, there are a couple stages even to the fastness of it, but I'm gonna let Simon take this one. Yeah.
All right, so how fast is Sparklite? Well, we are talking in milliseconds here. So the upload can take up to about 30 seconds, depending on the size of your file, but the API requests are fairly quick. Again, it depends on, how big your file is. If you have millions of formulas on there, very tough formulas, it might lead to a delay, but usually it doesn't. Of course, depends on how fast your internet is. But I'll just show you how quick the API run is because I'll connect it to my Bubble app and then we'll see, that it's quite instant and we can test the API on Sparklite as well. So yeah, we'll get into that too.
Gotcha. There you go. So that love that question, by the way. And I think while we were doing our mock runs, we had Adam ask us as well. He's from our team. Was very kind to ask what how reliable the APIs. I think so. So I think at the moment we've not had this uptime status monitoring yet. I think typically that's where you can see how what's the uptime of an API, what's the latency of the pings, and a bunch of other technical data is sort of collated in a nice little dashboard. I think if we have enough people asking for that, we'll of course try and push that through and hopefully have that up and running. But so far, the way we've seen it, I think our code works really well. There's very little, I think, as far as I can remember, there hasn't been any breakage of sorts yet of the code logic or the API itself. But besides that, really, it also depends on the kind of workflows and the functions you're working on. So thanks for the experience, Abhinav. I think, yeah, I don't think we have more questions for now, but in case if it comes up, we'll try and address them. So let's go. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, like I was saying, once you do enter Sparklite, this is your main homepage. You can see how many APIs you've created. You can go into each, see their details. On the left-hand side, you can view a little bit about your specific plan. So right now I'm on the professional plan. You can get a lot more details about the plans here. I mean, these prices are quite good, right? So pick whatever you like. We can talk about that in detail as well in the end if anybody would like to. But I do want to dive into how we create these APIs, right? So what we're going to do here is I'm going to introduce the Excel file that I worked on. It is a very simple Excel file, and these are basically some formulas that I copy pasted from Google. So again, not an actuary, not an engineer, not someone who has studied math. I was able to build this home loan EMI calculator. Now, what it calculates is depending on how much your total home loan is and how long it has to go for, as well as the interest rate that you got it on, how many monthly installments and exactly how much of a monthly installment you have to pay in order to fulfill that loan. So for example, for a $50,000 home loan, where the tenure is 10 years and the interest rate is 3%, I would have to pay $471 every month to kind of pay that loan off. It's a very simple formula as well. This table is basically that number into 10. So it's calculating for every month how much I pay and how much interest I've paid. Very simple, plus, minus, divide, multiply. There's absolutely nothing else involved in this, right? So this took me about an hour to build. And so now step number 1 is complete, right? I have my spreadsheet. I know exactly what I want to build. Step number 2 is when we come to the actual Sparklite mapping. So when we say mapping, what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell Sparklite that these are my inputs and these are my outputs. So keep kind of calculating it depending on what I tell you, right? And the way Sparklite understands this is that you select your input cell. So in this case, home loan amount is my input, right? I can keep changing it. And then depending on these 3 inputs, my output, which is my EMI, so my monthly installment, is going to change. Now, the way Sparklite understands this is through name ranges. On Excel, a name range is basically a name that you're giving to a cell or a table. And the way you can do that is select your cell. Within the formulas tab on the top, just go to the name manager and you're going to create a new name. What we're going to call it is with a syntax. So this syntax needs a prefix, which is X input underscore. And then beyond this, you can call it anything you want. I'm just going to call it home loan amount. Okay, so just to kind of repeat that, to name your inputs, select the cell or range, go to the formulas tab, click on the name manager, and then create a new name. The only requirement is to have a prefix of X input underscore, and then just click on OK. So now we have created the name. To confirm, you'll see it on the top left corner here. Similarly, with the outputs, we just call it X output underscore, and I'm naming it EMI per month. You can redo this, you can keep doing this for any number of cells or ranges. So for example, those were single celled inputs and outputs. I have named this entire range as an output. So I can select this whole thing and redo the steps. And then on the top left, you'll see X output underscore loan amortization schedule. The only thing to remember for ranges is that your first row has to be the header row, but that's the case with any table, right? So yeah, that's how you perform mapping. This is basically how Sparklite understands what your inputs and outputs are. And of course, the biggest step, mind you guys, is click on save, right?
Right.
We cannot forget to save our Excel files. So Control S that, Command S that, or click on the floppy disk, but save your files, right?
Yeah. I've got so it's I think so far I think we've been great. For people who are listening to this very so much attentively, feel free to drop in your questions. I've got one which is something I've always still been curious about. Is the input, the X input that we add, is that case sensitive, or just people can add in whatever camel case they wanted, or perhaps in another format?
Yeah, okay, great question, but it's not case sensitive. You can write it in caps, lowercase, it doesn't matter. As long as you know it's in English and the computer can understand it's, as long as you can say X input underscore, that's fine. But everything after the prefix is case sensitive. So the way you type it is how you get it on the API.
Gotcha. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I think we have a couple comments. Can inputs be a list of numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Just how you can select a range and call it an output, you can select a range and call it inputs as well. So on Sparklite, you'll see an input table instead of a cell.
There we go. Yeah. And lovely question coming in from John, because hopefully we'll have more demos scheduled in the future. And we'll try and incorporate something of this sort so that people have a little bit more context into how they can build it. Love it. I think, yeah, I don't think, can inputs be formula? Okay, we have a question from Glenn. Can the inputs be formula? Yeah.
So yes, your inputs can be formulas, but if you do change the value in the API request body, or when you're testing the API or calling the API, for example, if you've connected your API on Bubble to an input box, if you enter something in the input box, it will erase the formula and override it. But there's no rule. If you have to leave your input the way it is, it can be a formula. If for any reason you have to pass it as an input, it can be a formula. But if you change the value of the input after it's been created into a Sparklite API, the new value will override the formula.
Amazing. And I'll be honest, people, we've actually not rehearsed this one, so it was a really interesting question out there in terms of whether or not these things can be like. I didn't know at least half of these things that are coming up, so please keep them coming. It's always interesting to know, okay, what else are people thinking and how else are you thinking to make use of it, right? Thank you, Glenn. Thanks, John. Love those questions. But cool. Okay, now that we have that map and we have saved it, thanks for the reminder. I always otherwise forget to do that. What's next? Where do we go from here?
All right, so we go back to Sparklite. If you guys remember, this is when I clicked on the create new API button. Now there are two options to upload your spreadsheet. You can start with the sample file that we saw on the website as well, or you can use our own spreadsheet. Again, there is a link on the mapping tutorial video here. So in case you forget, you can definitely check out that video. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to upload my file that I've just saved. Now, this should take about a few seconds, but what's happening in the background is that Sparklite is being super smart and it's converting all the logic that we had on that spreadsheet, all the inputs and the outputs, and that massive table, which I basically built in a few minutes, I think about close to an hour, but it's converting all that logic, all those formulas into code, right? Usually this process for a lot of companies can take a few months. So we're actually saving a lot of man hours in this. And yeah, you'll see once it's converted, you get a little bit of a summary of your API. So now your API is ready. We shall no longer talk about spreadsheets now. So we are only going to talk about the Sparklite API. It tells you a little bit about, how many cells it converted. So about 1,000 cells that were converted in about, I think that was about 15 to 20 seconds. Yeah, so my API is here, and I can go and click on API details, just check out what's happening here. Now, when I set that API as a connector before, this URL is basically the connection point, right? If I say an API is a bridge, that's your cement, right? So the only thing that can call this Sparklite API is this URL. Now you'll also see on the top here that my API is private, and that's only available on our paid plans. So yeah, I get the benefit that, only if you know the token that can call this API, will you be able to. Otherwise, you get an unauthorized error message. Now, just below the endpoint, what you can do is you can quickly test your API, right? So I want to say that a home loan amount is 6,000. That is very expensive. And my interest rate is about 3%. And let's say my tenure is 20 years, right? I submit it, and there you have it, right? I have a few details. Now let's try to change it again, and that's how we can see how quick the API is. I'm gonna say 70,000 for 10 years, submit, and yeah, there you go. I don't think Saurabh got a chance to turn his head, and we have the API.
There we go.
You can scroll down to kind of, get a little bit of an idea if you want some auditability details, but you can see the entire table that was mapped, all the single values. It's a quick run on your API to make sure all the values that you had put in your Excel file got correctly transferred, and that bridge was successfully built towards your app, right? And this is my favorite part. So for someone who wants to automate their entire life, I love building these apps, right? And I've had my fair share of fun on these apps. I think the Sparklite team have built some very funky apps. We've built a dad joke generator. We have built a calorie amortization app. We've done some funky stuff, and it's a lot of fun, right? So, for example, Bubble, Retool, Postman, you can basically integrate with any no-code tool out there that allows REST APIs. So if you were to click on Bubble, and by the way, just a quick heads up, this is something we wanted to announce to everybody. We've just launched our official Bubble plugin. So if anybody is interested in looking up, Adam, maybe you can post the link of the plugin on the chat and everybody can have a look. But Bubble has also made an official announcement on their LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to go check it out, please do. Our documentation is also available in our user guide. So yeah, feel free to play around with that. But if you'd like to integrate with Bubble manually, then you can just click here and follow all these steps. Again, this is my authorization token, by the way. And yep, this is the sample body that you would have to copy and paste onto Bubble. Any questions on the API before I move on to my actual Bubble app?
Yeah, I think love the explainer. A couple of things for people who are listening in, right? When you look at the headers and like the JSON data, being able to make those post requests, if this is something which is really new, don't worry about it. Like, we have a team of people here at Sparklite. We'd be more than happy to sort of help you build some of these things in case you're ever wondering, okay, there is Excel. I know Excel. I am great at Excel, but I know jack about the API. Don't worry, we'll try and make that life a lot more simpler as well. And that's the whole idea, building these small plugins, building some of these connectors with different applications is just to make your life even more simpler, where you have to think a lot less about actually what an API is and how exactly do I make that work. But yeah, questions. Yeah, okay, Glenn has a comment. I'd love to see this working as a third-party API request within a Xano backend app. Actually, amazing comment, right? I think, Glenn, that you'd actually appreciate this. I think we have a series of webinar that we have designed. So this one is just more of an intro one. Now that you know, okay, what is it that we do? The next one we are going to have, and this is more something I was just keeping for the end, but we'll have one with Bubble. We'll share some more details. hopefully in the coming days. And after that, the idea is to get another tool, say for example, Retool, Streamlit. Practically we can actually even consider Xano now that you mentioned it, and see how we can actually make it work. Since this is an API, we can practically use this wherever anybody, any tool allows us to make that external API call. We can practically use these in any of those scenarios and situations. So absolutely love the idea. Xano goes on the list. Yeah, feel free to share your comments, questions, yeah, from there.
Sweet.
Okay.
Yeah, so just gonna dive into my Bubble app. By the way, I built it using our plugin. So it's a simple plugin where you just have to install it through the plugin page and then build a workflow. So when you start building a workflow, the plugin's API will show up as an option. And this is something we're still getting a lot of feedback on. So if you do find any issues, do let us know. Although it's working pretty well so far. So, okay, let's dive into it, right? So this is my Bubble canvas. Let me zoom in a little bit so everyone can see. Now it looks pretty empty right now, but that's just because, I've kind of shoved everything on there. A lot of things are hidden. A lot of things are kind of, just I've made them look like it's very complicated, but it's really not. All I had to do in my workflow is basically when a button is clicked, call the Sparklite API. That is it. Everything else on the workflow is Bubble UI related. All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and preview this app. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, you guys kind of show the end result. I was hoping not to show, but that's okay. Okay, so this is a simple app that I had built. Again, this is calling the Sparklite API. So if you remember the logic that we had built on the spreadsheet, depending on your home loan amount, interest rate, and loan tenure, it's going to tell you how much you got to pay every month to make sure you pay off your loan. This is a home loan, but I was thinking of building something similar for maybe college loans because that's more of my demographic. So yeah, I don't think I could afford that home loan anyway. But yeah, some of the UI capabilities that I added, a little bit of a description, some cheeky tool tips that define, a little bit more. I can reset my input. So these are just some default inputs that I've added. But if I change it to 6,000, I can reset it. And then this is my try at being a designer. So don't judge, but I've tried to build an empty state, basically to push people to click on the button. So we're kind of nudging people, oh, your output values will appear here. Just click on the calculate button to see the output summary. Now, if I click on the calculate EMI button on the first load, this is what comes up. Now, everything that you see here, all the number values, it's all coming from Sparklite. And the time it takes from the moment you click on the button until you see all the values is how quick the API is. So yeah, this is telling me I have to pay an EMI of about 60,600 a month to reach that value of about 5 million worth of loan, out of which my principal payment is 5 million. But then in the end, I'll end up paying a lot more because I choose the EMI route, right? Let's try with maybe 1 million. So try to remember that share. That's why I've added a pie chart to kind of show the difference. So if you see here, obviously the values change, which proves how dynamic Sparklite can be. The calculation is quick. It's dynamic. It's very, very strong. We are leveraging Excel's capabilities and trying to provide an engine that can power your smart apps. So you don't have to connect to thousands of APIs out there just to make your app dynamic and smart. Build it all on Excel and create one API out of it. Right. And yeah, if anybody's interested in looking at that really long table, this is my take at being a UX designer. So if you click on this thing, and oof, it scrolls down, and you see the entire table. So again, this as well is dynamic. And yeah, that is my take on a Bubble app. We've built a
Yeah.
lot more, but this took me about 2.5 hours, including the UI design, and the logic on my spreadsheet. I did take a little help on the logic for the spreadsheet, but who doesn't? So, yeah. Any
All
question?
right. Awesome. Well, I think we learned quite a few things, but more importantly, I think we learned Sandra's dream house is about 5 million. That's always good to know where the expectations are and where is it that Sandra's heading. So thanks for sharing. I think while we wait for a couple folks to add in their questions, yeah, thanks Glenn and John. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for all the support there. Appreciate that, Glenn. While you have a couple more folks adding in their questions, right? So I mean, you can help us also now give us a sense of what's the real world applications. Where can people actually start building some of these things, right? So that it's actually helpful to other people. Where can people do that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've researched, we do product discovery on a regular basis for Sparklite, and we have met some wonderful individuals along the way who have thought that, this could be powering the next biggest company out there. So whether it's your financial calculator, for example, if you want to check out, if you're meeting your end of the year sales, you can use Sparklite.
Mm.
If, like I mentioned before, if you're a homeowner and you want to calculate your personal finances, build the logic on Sparklite just with a few formulas. At the end of the day, you'll get an app out of a no-code solution like Bubble or Retool, and input your values into, this is how much I spent, this is how much my wife spent, this is how much my child spent, and that app will be able to give you a value of how much you saved or how much you overspent, all powered by the Sparklite engine. Something
Okay.
that I would likely use it for is probably to, definitely a home financing app. But I'd be keen to kind of see some environmental impact out of this. We have a few sample apps that kind of showcase, an ROI generator, or how much money you save if that's the amount of recycling plastic bottles you recycle. So I'd be interested in that. I know my younger brother, who is 4 years younger to me, so he's about, I'm not going to say how old he is, but he's still in school, right? So he's still in school, and I explained it to him once, I remember, and he was very happy to hear about it. And he was like, "Oh, so can I build my study flashcards on Sparklite and on a no-code app?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can." So I mean, all you have to do is think of that logic in your head, right? Think of what it's calculating, and honestly, you can build anything out of it. One day, I'm going to build a game on Sparklite. That is my
Oh,
goal.
that's the dream. That's the goal. Okay, amazing. I think thanks. And we have another question from John. Okay, so that's a quite interesting one as well. Does the uploaded spreadsheet continue to power the API, or does it just extract the formulas upon upload? What happens there?
So when we upload the spreadsheet onto Sparklite, and this is a good architecture question, right? So when we upload the spreadsheet to Sparklite, it converts everything onto code just once. So it's quick and it's done just once. You no longer have to call the spreadsheet again and again every time your API runs. So whatever is in your spreadsheet then gets converted through some encrypted process into code, and that's the code we call.
Awesome.
So
Yeah. Hope that answered the question there, John. And by the way, quick heads up to everybody. I've enabled microphone now, so I think you all should have some access there. Feel free to unmute yourself in case you'd like to sort of share something. And in the meantime, we have another question coming in from Steve. Does Sparklite only work with Bubble?
Does Sparklite only work with Bubble? Absolutely not. We have some sample apps built on our website with Retool. We've had folks build it on Streamlit. Streamlit is another great low-code platform using Python and their own library. I've built an app on a no-code tool called Flutter Flow. It's a pretty good one as well. Great community. And then, of course, I'm definitely going to try Xano now that Glenn has mentioned it. So yeah, sky's the limit.
Really, yeah. Since it's an API, I suppose the possibilities are endless. You can practically use it everywhere that allows you to make that API call. I think we have another question from Adam. Yeah, okay. I think somebody must have asked this. If I want to connect to somewhere other than the plugins, what do I do? Yeah, okay. That's an interesting question there. Yeah.
So that's a great question, right? And number one is if you are interested in integrating it with something other than the available plugins, do send us a message so we can, think about it with, us in the product team. We can think about it and add it as an integration option. But other than that, most of the no-code tools out there are pretty flexible, and all they need are three things. Number one is your endpoint, which is available on the API page. Number two is going to be your headers. So if it's a private API, you need to input your bearer token, and we do have another header as well. So, and it's all available. You don't have to code anything in. Just go to the API page and copy paste, copy paste. The third thing is going to be your API request body, also readily available. So if you just scroll down and maybe just open the Postman box, you get all the details. Most no-code tools out there are quite flexible in all of this, but again, as Saurabh mentioned, if there are any questions on how to get started, just message us. We'll do the research and then we'll let you know.
Yeah, well, there we have it. Do I hear somebody who wants to ask a question? Sorry, I think I keep hearing something, and I feel if I'm actually not allowing the time. But if that's the case, feel free to just unmute and speak. In the meantime, okay, so Glenn's got a good comment, and Glenn, I'm not going to even lie, but let me just share the comment for the rest of the group. Like, I think Glenn says he's using the new version of the wizard. I think it's V2 for building web apps on top of Webflow. So you could probably connect the APIs much easily there. And I'm not going to lie, I had my meeting with Dan, a person who's leading the entire team at Daniel, who's leading the entire team at Sparklite. And one of the things he mentioned was, let's see if we can build something on Webflow as well. And when I tried Googling it, I figured everything is JavaScript there. And I was like, okay, that's like a little low code-ish where people need to write a little bit of JavaScript to be able to make that. I think, Glenn, that's essentially what you're referring to. I'm guessing now we may have a way to do this in a more no-code way of doing it. And if so, that's amazing. That's great to know. Would love to have you on one of these webinars showing us how we do this on Webflow. That would be amazing. Yeah, so the wizard, right? Yeah, I imagine 100% no code, right? I think that would be really cool, pretty kick-ass. If there's a way we can do a plugin or integration with them, yeah, do give us a nudge, do give us a shout out there. Yeah, okay. Nick has a question, more of a out systems questions. I'm not too sure what that is, Nick. If you want to maybe, is that a tool or is that like a workflow that you're referring to that I'm missing? Yeah, not 100% sure. It's a low-code tool, the OutSystems. Well, if they allow for the API request, absolutely. If you can write code a little bit, like for instance, AppScript also uses low code, uses JavaScript, essentially being able to make that post request or get request absolutely doable, right? If those platforms allow for us to make those API calls, we should be able to do it. Honestly, though, I haven't explored OutSystems myself. Not sure, Sadhana, if you have, feel free to share any comments, but we'll explore them. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking at it and it looks very, very cool. So this is something that, I can definitely pass on to the team. We have some brilliant people working in the low code industry. So yeah, thanks for all of that. I'll note it down and I'll pass it on to the team. And I'm pretty sure we can, try some integration with them.
Yeah, all right, amazing. I'm just loving it. All I'm happy about right now is people actually asking questions and engaging with their comments. That's always helpful when having such conversations. I love how intimate this is. We don't have like hundreds and thousands of people. Not that we're expecting 1,000 folks. It would be nice, but it's okay. It's always helpful to have these kind of conversations, right? And that's what we love. We'll continue having these webinars as well. Again, feel free to keep sharing your questions on the way. I know some folks may have to like hop off. We're about to hit our 1 hour mark. So here's a bit of an activity that we've all been waiting for, hopefully so. It's more of a show and tell. It's very basic. Essentially, now that you know what you can build using Sparklite, feel free to go ahead and give it a shot. You don't have to give us your credit card. Just go ahead and sign up. You'll get an amazing trial period. You essentially get free forever. You can be on the forever free tier as well, and just use the tool. Build something, and it doesn't have to be something super like 100, people. It doesn't have to attract 100,000 users. Build anything that you feel like is useful enough. Go ahead and share it with the world. If you are comfortable doing so on your socials or other places that you feel like people might actually need it or it's something of helpful to others, feel free to share it. Or if you're one of those people who don't love sharing on social media, just send it to us on our email, hello@sparklite.io, and we can share it on your behalf. You'll have all the credit. And of course, get some merch by the end of it all. We need your addresses to be able to ship them. So I'm going to reach out, somebody from our team or me will reach out to you, get your addresses, and ship you some merch. So that's an opportunity. And I think we're doing this for the very first time. This is one of the very first webinars we're doing. So you're really the first cohort of people that we are engaging in this space to see, how well you're able to receive it, and of course, be able to use it in real life. Like that's really the end goal. Yeah, I think in case if you have more questions, you can find us on our socials. We have emails. We are on Twitter and LinkedIn. Feel free to send us messages anywhere on these channels and platforms. And we have the inbuilt chat app. Feel free to send us messages there. Yeah. I think John has a comment on the plugin library. Yeah, I think that's the case. We'll have to sort of understand and probably root those out. I don't know if we have built them ourselves or somebody else is building. If that's cool, if community is contributing to creating plugins, but there it is. Yeah, but other than that, I think that is pretty much it from a show and tell standpoint. Cool.
Big thanks, everyone. Yeah. It has been amazing talking to you guys. And yeah, I'm super excited to see everybody's apps and send some merch your way. There's some very cool stuff that Saurabh and I are thinking of sending, not just, the basic merch that everybody gets. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, for your questions, for your comments. The product team is always looking for good feedback and questions, most importantly, questions, so that we can improve the product and offer better support.